let's talk about the making of it. So as we mentioned before, 2 years prior, Kanye did lose his mom. He did release 808s before this, and not only that, but we were talking about how scrutinized he was. So all of the flair and all of the arrogance through this album was projected. It was very strong. We saw it. Do you feel as if it was a product maybe of, him going through all of that was able, that we were able to get that Kanye, or do you think it was something that he was planning creatively for a while?
I don't think that's what he was planning on doing, because if you look about how he talks about that album now, he says that My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is nowhere near the project that 808s and Yeezus was. So I feel like he was transitioning into this kind of more experimental stuff, not making the music that people wanted him to make. But with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, I personally feel like he was, like you said, at the lowest point in his career, and he had something to prove. That's why he went all out for this album.
Yeah, and people were saying that his career was essentially over. People had shunned him, and, people didn't know if we would ever get another Kanye album, period. So what he did is he kind of went into self-exile. He traveled to Japan, he traveled to Rome, just to, gain some culture and its inspiration for MBDTF. And then he went to Hawaii in 2009, where the actual recording of the album
the
would take
famous
place.
Hawaii recordings, man. You hear so many stories of there, and the type of process that he was going through. I believe he did flew everyone out that was on the album. So Kid Cudi was there, Nicki Minaj was there, Rick Ross was there. I can't confirm Rick Ross, actually. Don't quote me on that.
Rick Ross was there. But sure he was.
Okay, he was there. I'm sorry, I don't have like the exact context of like the list and everything. But he invited a lot of people just because I feel as if he wanted people to be in their element when creating this album. And it's one of the strongest points of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is that feature list. Without that feature list, man, like you're not getting a lot of these songs, like, and it's to a point where you look at the feature list and you're like, how fucking stacked could this actually get? And then, obviously he did that all in Hawaii, and then he released the whole album. Not only that, but I want to talk about a bit of a transition point between that 2008 to 2010 when he did drop My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. That is when he started interning, for the stumble of words, at Fendi. I think it was Fendi with Virgil Abloh. So he was also starting to get into his more luxury side. He started making exclusive designs. He was interning there. And I feel as if that also had a big presence on his album, and we see that luxury talk. We see that sort of sparkle, that flair come out in this album. So Tilly, let me ask you this. If Kanye didn't have that side of fashion to him, or he didn't have that flair to him, with the clothes and, all the fashion statements, do you think we would have gotten My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy in the way that we got it in, or do you think that has effect on it?
I mean, that's a really good question. I haven't thought about it in that way, but when you look at the grandness of the album and the way that he talks about it, is when he was making the album, he wasn't comparing himself to anybody alive. He was like, I'm looking at the pyramids, I'm looking at Michelangelo, I'm looking at the past greats, and I'm going to try to make something that stacks up to them. So I feel like definitely the fashion could have played into that and making something like bigger than music, just creating pure art with the album.
Yeah, and what's crazy is that, he had a whole process, which RZA describes as starting off by planning out his day, working out, doing charity work, and then going to the studio where he would lock himself in and have sleepless nights. Like he would only sleep, let's say, for 90 minutes in one chair certain nights, just so that he can put all his energy, into recording. And it's just crazy to see, what his work ethic was. And apparently, I don't know if this was just during certain portions of the recording, but he would make all the engineers walk into the studio with suits on. Like that was a requirement for them to be wearing suits. That just shows the level of focus and the vision that Kanye had to, execute a fantastic album.
Yeah, not only that, but he had to set up that aesthetic so people were in that mode. And another crazy stat, it is actually one of the highest budgets. I think it's actually the highest. It's the most expensive album ever made.
It's one of the most expensive albums ever made.
I think he got a budget of like $3 million from Def Jam.
Yeah.
$3 million to make an album, man. That's crazy. So I guess that's where we see, all the expensive features. That's where we see the whole rollout. I mean, the rollout was almost seamless. I mean, I remember from a consumer standpoint more than anything, because I was young, right? Like I didn't have any knowledge in marketing, or I didn't know about rollouts. I didn't know about these triggers and stuff. So looking at it from a consumer back then, it was crazy because Kanye was always in your face. Kanye was everywhere you looked and Kanye was everywhere you moved. It was to a point where, you know, all of the lights and power were playing on every single radio station that I was listening to. And another crazy fact about Power is that apparently he spent 5,000 hours making that song. So, you know, do you think that was just a product of him being a perfectionist, or do you think that he really wanted to get this one right more than anything?
I think he really wanted to get this one right specifically, because while he is a perfectionist, you look at 808s and they say that they had that thing pretty much done in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Like this was not the same thing. He was putting in the time on every single song. Like you said, he said 5,000 man hours went into Power, and it was like that for every single track on this album.
Wow, yeah, and you hear the quality, because even everything from the engineering, the vocals, you know, the placement of the tracks, the track list placement, you know, from one all the way to, I believe it is. Let me just pull this on my phone real quick.
I believe that there's 13 tracks.